everybody, Joshua Laycock here. I was reading an article today about professionals in my industry and asking the question, should the professionals, as they're entering into our space or as they're leveling up their game, should they become specialists in a niche market or be generalists? And the article did a pretty good job of kind of weighing the pros and cons of both, and I think that there's something to be said in a professional setting for being, there's arguments in both ways, whether it's, I started my career as a deep specialist, became a generalist, and then ironically now I'm sort of becoming a bit of a specialist again in my niche area. But it got me thinking about life in general, and that's what we're here for, right? Is evolving and leveling up our lives, not just our careers, but everything. And it made me think about a situation that my wife and I had experienced over the last couple years. And it was a bit of a realization we had maybe about a month ago or so ago. So starting a couple years ago, we were carrying an uncomfortable amount of debt. We were never in trouble. We weren't having problems making minimums or anything like that. But we just sort of, through complacency and not enough attention, had accumulated a level of debt that we just thought was not comfortable. It just was sort of hanging over us. So we decided that, hey, that's enough of this. Let's pay attention. Let's nuke this debt really quickly and get it out of the way so that we can move forward on some of the things that we want to do. And we did. I'll give just about all the credit to my wife. She really took that bull by the horns and laid out a game plan, and we stuck to it. And as I said, in a fairly short period of time, we decimated a significant amount of debt. And as we got down to zero, we almost became, well, not almost, we became obsessed with keeping it at zero. And that's fine, but we became obsessed with this goal, and we focused on it and lasered in on it, but at the expense of a bunch of other stuff. We weren't able to enjoy anything that we wanted to do. We weren't prepared to go on a trip. We weren't prepared to do anything. And I know, look, you should be able to do all those things without incurring debt. I'm just talking about a credit card or a line of balance here or there and just minor things. But we weren't saving as much as we wanted to because we were obsessed about keeping this debt thing at zero. And you know, there's a whole story that we can talk about money management. But the point of today is that we were sacrificing other goals and other priorities based on some unnecessary expectation of zero debt. So that is, I believe, or I'm becoming comfortable with the belief that, look, with adequate cash flow, if you've got a little bit of debt on there, it's not the end of the world. It's not ideal, but it's certainly not worth getting in the way of things like savings and setting money aside as an emergency fund and those sorts of things. So this isn't a financial post per se, but it was really, the point being is we got really hyper-focused on one thing and we allowed other things to be ignored and atrophied. And it kind of tags onto my post the other day about relationships and not taking your eye off the ball on other things. But are there areas in your life where you've become so hyper-focused on some sort of goal or objective, whether it's a worthy goal or something that is completely subjective, a subjective objective, that you're missing other parts of life? You know, a good example is I have some friends who are absolutely obsessed with fitness, and good for them, but they kind of bellyache about not being able to go out and enjoy a really nice meal. They're kind of exhausted about the idea of always watching what they're eating and being obsessive about these things. And yes, they've achieved a remarkable level of fitness, but that level of specialization, of hyper-focus on one particular goal, I think might be causing other areas of their life to atrophy. And that's an interesting thing. So talking to you in the context of lifestyle evolution, as we want to evolve our entire lives, are you focusing too much on one aspect? Are you hyper-focused on something that is maybe costing you other areas? And I do think that as you're looking to evolve and move forward, we really need to have a bit of a balanced approach in the aggregate. Like, look, if you're wicked out of shape, you might need to focus a disproportionate amount of your energy on getting your health in check. Or if you are smothered by debt, yes, I think that you need to spend a disproportionate amount of your energy in the short run getting that in check, or managing your spending, or dealing with budgets, dealing with meal preps and all that sort of thing. But in the aggregate, I think over the longer term, we need to make sure that we're engineering a balanced life so that we're not so hyper-focused on one thing that we let other areas slide. It just kind of touched on it because there was this huge article about the value of being a hyper-specialist. And even from a career perspective, I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with that, because look, if you're a hyper-specialist and your world changes, well, what else do you know? And if you don't want to become necessarily known as the guy or girl who does X, from a thing perspective or from a product perspective, but rather having transferring skills. So I'm kind of going off on a bit of a tangent about that. But I'm never a huge fan of being a hyper specialist, unless, look, that's your thing. But I do think that those paths are limited. And I think, like in life, there's only a limited path that you can travel when you're hyper focused on something. A really good example is the book, it's Cleaners. It's Unstoppable, by Tim Grover, who was the coach or the athletic trainer for Michael Jordan and a bunch of other high performing athletes. And he identified those individuals with sort of an obsessive focus on a goal as being these cleaners. And he talked about what it takes to be a cleaner, but what I liked about it is he didn't romanticize about it. He said, look, it's going to come at significant cost. If you want to be the best athlete, you're going to have to sacrifice other things. If you're going to want to be, and to be fair, if you're going to want to be the best father or mother that you could possibly be, you may have to sacrifice some career progression. So there's a value, I think, in focus, but there's also a risk that we run when we try to get too deep and too hyper focused on something, and like a lot of life, trying to take a bit of a balanced or measured approach. So that's all I have to say about that. I would be interested to hear back. I'm loving the engagement that I'm getting from some of you folks on the YouTube channel and in Instagram. That's amazing. I really appreciate it, because what's the point of me doing all this if I'm not touching base with people? Tell me a story. Is there something in your life where you became so obsessed with it that you actually allowed other areas of your life to slide? Or maybe, hey, a success story that you pulled yourself out of a funk or a tough spot because you were able to exercise some short-term hyper-focus. So that's my message for today. Be wary of going too deep and too obsessive about one thing, certainly when it comes at the expense of other things in our lives. And I do think that at the end of the day, when we're looking back on our lives, I suspect we will probably look more fondly over a life that is more successful on a variety of different endeavors than having gone all in on one thing and sacrificing stuff that maybe we didn't appreciate was important at the time, but looking back, we realized that perhaps it was. That's all I have to say today. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. I hope it's warm wherever you are. It's a chilly one today, but we will talk very, very soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.